Hello and welcome to this tutorial, and in this tutorial we are going to learn something about the radio buttons. So radio buttons are basically similar to the checkboxes, but the case with radio buttons is that whenever you are presented with multiple options in a checkbox, you could select as many options as you want, but in case of radio buttons, in the group of a radio button you could select only one radio button according to the choice. So for example, let's say if you want to select the gender between male and female, you could only select one of them and not both of them. So basically a radio button is used to select one choices among multiple choices. So in this application or in this tutorial we are going to create a simple application for radio buttons for selecting the gender. So let's go ahead and start with the tutorial. So the first thing which we do is that we create a new Android Studio project, and let's name it as my radio app. Then click next and go with API level 15. Click next, select a blank activity, and let's name the main activity as main activity itself. Then finally hit finish. So as you could see, our application is ready, and now the next thing which we do is that we delete hello world. And for adding a radio button, you cannot simply drag a radio button and drop it over here, because the first thing which we need to do is that we need to create a thing which is called as a radio group, which is going to group together the various radio buttons which we have. So the first thing which we do is that we create a new radio group. So in order to create a new radio group, we switch to the XML view right here, and we are going to add in a radio group to this relative layout right here. So in order to add a radio group here, we go inside the relative layout and then we type in radio group, and then finally we are going to close the tag. And once we have the radio group, we are actually going to type in some code in there. So the first thing which we need to give or we need to assign to this radio group is going to be the ID. So we type Android ID equals @+ID, and let's name this as radio_group. And it is actually showing us an error. That is because we have not yet assigned the layout width and height. So in order to assign it, we type in Android layout_width, and we are going to make it equal to match parent. And for the layout height, we are going to make it to wrap content. So we type Android layout height equals wrap content. And actually for a radio group we need to assign the orientation. So for example, if you want to let's say place the radio buttons in a vertical fashion, so we need to assign the orientation to vertical, and if you wish to make it horizontal, then simply assign the Android orientation to horizontal. So we type Android orientation, and we are going to make it equal to vertical, as we are going to place in the buttons vertically. So once we have everything in place, we switch to design view, and if we click on this button right here, as you could see, a new radio group has been added right over here. Now we actually need to add in the radio buttons to this radio group. So in order to add a radio button to the radio group, we simply select the radio button, drag it, and instead of dropping it over here, we are going to go ahead and drop it over here. So as you could see, one radio button has been added, and let's go ahead and add one more. So we select it, go over here and drop it in the radio group. So as you could see, two radio buttons have been added, and finally we could go ahead and work with them. And also we actually need to have a large text view over here. So we drag a large text and drop it over here. So let's say we want to select a gender, either male or female. So let's go ahead and change the text of these two radio buttons. So we simply select the first radio button, go to properties, and we change the text to male. And for the second one, we are going to change it to female. And now the next thing which we do is that we actually assign IDs to both of these. So we simply select it, go to properties, and change ID to male. And for the female, we are going to simply replace the ID to female. And also we need to assign the ID to the large text view. So we simply go to properties, go to ID, and change this thing to my text view. So once everything is done, we are good to go. And finally we could write in the Java code in order to make this thing work. So we switch to the main activity.java, and we delete the toolbar and the unnecessary code. So we delete the toolbar and we delete the code which is present right over here. So once we have deleted it, the next thing which we do is that we actually need to add in methods to these two things right here. So one more thing which we need to do in this layout right here is select the first radio button, go to properties, and inside the on click, let's go ahead and add a method here. So we add a method called as on clicked to first radio button as well as the second radio button. So once we have done adding it, we switch to main activity.java and we are going to create a method which is called as on clicked. So we go right below on create and then we type public void on clicked. To this we pass in view, and basically the things which we are doing here are similar to what we have done in the example for the checkboxes. So the first thing which we do is that we actually get a reference to the text view. So we type text view equals, then we typecast it to text view, and then we get a reference by typing find view by id r.id.myTextView. So now once we have the reference, we could go ahead and write the code for actually selecting either of the two checkboxes. So in order to do that, the first thing which we need to do is that we need to get a reference to the radio group instead of getting the reference to the radio button. So once we have a reference to the text view, the next thing which we do is that we get a reference to the radio view. So we type, or the radio group, sorry. So radio group, we name it as radio group equals, and we typecast it to radio group again. So we type radio group, and then finally we type find view by id r.id.radio group. So once we have the reference to the radio group, we could go ahead and check the id and save it in the integer variable called id. So we type int id equals radio group dot get checked radio button id, and basically this method right here is going to return the id of the check button. So for example, if the check button is going to be male, it is going to return the id male, and if it is a female, then it is going to return us the id called female. So once we have these two things, finally in order to change the text of the text view, we create a switch. So we type switch and we pass in the id which we have right now, and inside the switch we are going to design the case for these ids. And for doing that, we type the first case as case r.id. And first thing which we do is that we do the id for male. So we type if the case is male. So if the case is that we have selected the male, so we go ahead and assign a value of male to the text view. So we type text view dot set text, and we are going to pass in male, then we are going to break, and for the second case we are going to type case r.id.female, give a colon, and then we are going to type in text view dot set text, and we are going to set the gender to female, and finally we are going to break it. So we type break here, and I think I've given double semicolons here, so I'm going to delete one of them. And okay, once we have these things done, we are good to go, and we could finally run our application onto the emulator so as to check if it performs correctly. So as you could see, our application is up and running on the emulator, and whenever we select the first option called male, the text is going to change to male, and when we select the second option, which is female, the text here is going to change to female. So that's how you create a basic radio button application, and you could implement the radio button in your Android application so as to provide a choice to the user whenever the user has to select one of the whenever the user has to select only one choice from multiple choices. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thank you.